the five names that Mel Kiper threw out, and he was on a virtual call with the Atlanta media, I guess it was, the other day, and he threw out five names that the Falcons should be looking at in the first or second round. And I thought the names were interesting. In his mock draft, in his 2-round mock draft, he's got the Atlanta Falcons selecting Nolan Smith in the first round and Keely Ringo in the second round. Now, as far as Nolan Smith goes, I like that pick. Again, a guy that come off the edge, maybe a little bit undersized, but we'll see what kind of happens with all of that. But again, I don't have a problem drafting Nolan Smith at number 8. I think he's that kind of talent, and obviously he's a leader for this team, for the Georgia Bulldogs, I should say. So I don't have a problem with that. Keely Ringo is an interesting guy because I don't think that he's going to be in the second round. I don't think that when it all shakes out that he's a second round player. I don't think he'll be at 44. I think he's a first round talent. I think he's going to be a first round pick. Corners are obviously a premium position in today's NFL. So I don't think that he could be there at 44. Maybe, but I don't think when it's all said and done. But the other three names that he put out there were Jalen Hyatt, Jonathan Mingo, and Josh Downs. Now, Jalen Hyatt, obviously the Biletnikoff Award winner, wide receiver out of Tennessee. Jonathan Mingo, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, and Josh Downs, a wide receiver out of North Carolina. Now, we talked about the idea last week, I guess it was, or a week ago or whatever, a couple weeks ago or whatever, that I kind of prioritized what I thought should be the most important positions for the Falcons to draft, focusing on edge first, cornerback 1, offensive guard, tackle, offensive lineman, let's put it that way, number 3, and then wide receiver. And I do think that the Falcons are in the market for a wide receiver. Now, do I want a wide receiver first or second round? And I talked with Bucky Brooks about this last night on the show. He doesn't seem to think that there would be a movement for a Jackson Smith-Njigba. He's probably a top 10 pick, maybe top 12 pick. But the idea of drafting pass catcher 3 years in a row, again, do you remember the only other team that drafted pass catcher 3 years in a row? It's the Detroit Lions. Okay. And what happened to the Detroit Lions 3 years after they drafted 3 first-round pass catchers? What happened to them? They were 0-17. Why? Because those aren't positions that influence the outcome of a game. If you're deficient at winning football games, those are not positions that can influence a football game directly. Again, O-line, D-line, your quarterback. You get those things right, you won't lose in the NFL. You'll be around for a long time. Okay? But I do think it's interesting that Kiper looks at wide receiver as a definite position that, and he's talking about first or second round picks for the Falcons. So I think Ringo or Nolan Smith are in that first round, although he's got Ringo mocked in the second round. But it would be interesting to see if the Falcons do spend draft capital on another wide receiver. And yes, I understand the philosophy of, we got to, give more weapons to Desmond Ridder and this, that, and the other. But are the Falcons really that desperate for weapons? I mean, Jonnu Smith and Pitts and Drake London and Cordell Patterson and Tyler Algier. I mean, Falcons do have a nice cavalcade of weapons available to Desmond Ridder. Where they got to get better is their defensive line of scrimmage, probably a corner, and continue to bolster their offensive line. I promise you that the thing that Desmond Ridder needs more than another wide receiver is a guy to make sure that he can stand up if he throws the football. Not having Jalen Mayfield and Drew Dalman or Matt Hennessy side by side. That's a lot more important to what the Falcons are going to do than adding another wide receiver to the room. But I do think that wide receiver is a pick that if you get into the 3rd, 4th round, that's a position where I would draft a wide receiver, but I'm not drafting a wide receiver in my first 2 picks. I got enough of those guys. I got enough high draft capital. Okay. I got enough high draft capital in pass catcher. And again, I made a trade for a Jonnu Smith. I know he's a tight end, but he's still a pass catcher, right? And I have a Cordero Patterson that I can throw the football to a lot. And Algier can catch some passes out of the backfield. I don't think I'm hurting for pass catching. Yes, I mean, do we have first team all-pro wide receiver? No, but again, we're not that kind of team. We're not an offensive. Again, we're not San Diego or Cincinnati that throws the football 75% of the time. And we're probably not going to be that until we get, a Pat Mahomes at quarterback or somebody like that. We're not going to be that kind of offensive style and system. They weren't that way under any offense that Arthur Smith has run, even when he was in Tennessee. It wasn't like Ryan Tannehill hucked it around 35, 40 times a game. He had to play to Matt's strengths, and, Matt was 600 pass attempts. But again, until you have that kind of quarterback, we're not going to be that kind of offense. Arthur Smith is going to be a control the line of scrimmage, run first type of guy. So I understand the names, and I don't have a problem with the talent. Smith, Ringo, Hyatt, Mingo, Downs. I think all of those guys are very talented players. I like Hyatt a lot. Obviously he's the Biletnikoff Award winner. He'd be a nice piece to add. But if I have to spend a first or second round pick to get a Jalen Hyatt, I'll let him pass by because I got bigger fish to fry. I got more needs on this football team than adding more pass catchers with using high draft capital to get it. And whether it's the number 8 pick or the number 44 pick, that's high draft capital. Those guys have to come in and start right away and make an impact on this football team. You can't sit around for a Jalen Hyatt at pick 44 to just kind of get in the flow of the offense and not acclimate as quickly or this, that, and the other, or he's not getting the targets or this or that or whatever like that. Like, you can't afford to wait for all that. We're trying to win now. And that's the other thing about this is that we have to be in win now mode. We've gone through our rebuild. We've gone through our cap purgatory and all these kinds of things. Now we have to win now. Now we have to find a way to win games now. And even if it's not winning the division, get this record up above 500. So I don't have a problem with Kiper's names: Ringo, Nolan Smith, Hyatt, Mingo, Josh Downs. I just don't know that when we're talking first or second round, that A, Ringo is going to be there in the second round, and B, if the Falcons should be looking at going wide receiver in the second round as well. All right, we thank you for making Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery your first listen every day. Make sure, if you're an everyday listener, that when you listen to our podcast, that you leave a comment in the box about being an everyday listener. We call them our everydayers, right? So we want to acknowledge you and get a feel for who's our everyday listeners out there. So please be sure to leave us a comment about being an everyday listener of Hittin' Hard with Jon Chuckery.